Thank you. I'm going to start off by opening my phone quickly. And if you look at Yahoo News this morning, on the front page, there's a story about the Durham spider. I'll actually read you the title of that. It says, "Venomous flying spider with 4-inch legs spread across East Coast." That was from this morning. It came out last night. So this is, I think, a timely topic. So I'm going to give a survey of this, given that most people don't know about the Durham spider, and if you're not coming from the deep south around Atlanta into South Carolina, you may not have seen this, but it is probably coming your direction. I'm going to try to convince you why. So first off, identification. Here you see the Durham spider. I'll show you throughout the presentation lots of variation in morphology, but generally speaking, this is an adult female. This is the most likely one that you're going to spot because they're so large. You'll notice that they have a banding both on their legs and on their abdomen, as well as a nice bright magenta coloration on the ventral side of their abdomen near their spinnerets. That's going to be the hallmark of what Duro is, not to be confused with our native species. This is our Gaiapeorantia, which is the spelling spider or garden spider. It's very common in this part of the country, in the southeastern United States, and they spread to other species throughout Latin America and North America as well. Differences here are not so much of the same banding pattern. On the legs, it looks more like they're wearing high-heel boots or thigh-high boots compared, as well as no magenta. And you have the stabilimenta in the web, that web design that they decorate their webs with. And then we also have a native cogener with the Duro spider called Trichonephila cladibes, which is native into the southern United States, down into Central and South America. And in this one, I would point out the brushes on the legs. The Duro spiders have smooth legs, where these have big brushes. And you can see some other differences, no banding on the abdomen as well. Moving on into the ecology, where are these spiders native from? Well, you can see in the larger figure in E, the distribution of this spider. They're mainly found in Japan, Korea, Taiwan, and then through portions of mainland China and into Nepal. But you can see that they don't cross down very much into India or into the southeastern Asia, like Thailand and Myanmar and those places. That's where they're native to. How did they get over here? It looks like they got over on shipping containers. And of all places, I'll show you where they started in North America in just a few seconds. These Duro spiders are known as golden orb weavers in the genus Trichonephila. And both nephilids and Trichonephila, there's been back and forth debate in the literature on whether they should be their own family, Nephilidae, or whether they're subsumed into other orb-weaving spiders. And there's just been a kind of a battle between the two labs, and it goes back and forth, so you can't keep up every week, it's changing. But Trichonephila for right now, they're known as golden silk orb weavers. You can see that golden silk there. And they're also quite large spiders overall. They can get up into an inch in body length, not including their legs. They make very, very large webs, several meters in diameter. And they're very, very disorganized. You can see with all the water droplets on that slide how kind of a cobweb appearance. For an orb-weaving spider, they're not as organized, and they're actually more three-dimensional. They have a central orb, and then on either side they have a tangled web that they use to maybe knock down prey into their orb as well. Okay, so a little bit different than other orb-weaving spiders overall. In terms of phenology, they're mainly active. You're going to see them at their largest and at their most abundant, most obvious in September through October. And that's when they're going to be at their peak in terms of visibility. So they're really good ambassador species for students because Halloween, and they're very, very abundant in free decorations during that time of year. As far as size, they'll actually come out in May, at the end of May or in mid-May, and they're very small. You can see for scale there some of the early neonates. They're even smaller than this when they're probably ballooning. You saw in the news story they're talking about flying, so they do disperse via this behavior called ballooning, and ballooning allows them to spread throughout the United States via winds, so storms and things blow them to new locations. They're not ballooning as large spiders, though. And then here's a little bit of the variation in morphology. Sometimes that banding pattern on the leg is visible, and sometimes it isn't. They're sexually dimorphic. You can see males versus females here, with the female being several orders of magnitude larger than the males. Okay, introduced range. So we said that they came over, it looks like they came over on shipping containers. This invasion was first noticed in 2014 and started in Brazelton, Georgia. And you can see Brazelton there on the map with all those black dots, with a few over north of Athens. And this was from the original 2015 paper that described this invasion. Since then, you can see through 2017 a slight expansion. And I'm going to take you through iNaturalist from every year from then until now. So 2018, you can see the observations, 2019, 2020, 2021, 2022, and 2023, this was the latest. And you can see that there's a population up in Baltimore. In fact, 2 years ago is when it was first noticed, and it's been stable for 2 years. So for the past 2 years, you've had a population that has come back 2 years in a row in the same exact neighborhood in Baltimore. So it doesn't look like the cold weather north of us is going to impede their continued spread. They can survive and overwinter. In fact, if you remember their native range was in South Korea and Japan, and that, in terms of latitude and climate, is closer to Michigan than it is to Tennessee, Georgia, or North Carolina. So again, cold weather doesn't seem to be something that's going to stop them from continuing to spread. In fact, that's exactly what we see. When we look at actual and calculate distances, we can see that they're spreading to the northeast and to the northwest a little bit faster than they're spreading in other directions. As well as when we model where we think they're going to be able to distribute, when we look at their native range and look at the climatic features that predict where they're found in Asia and try to map that onto North America, you can see that the places in North America that are most similar to their native range are well north of where they're currently establishing their invasion. Okay? So all of this together suggests to us that they're going to continue to spread, and you're going to start to see them further north in the United States as well as lots of other places, because if you look at these particular maps, where they're doing really, really well now, as you saw in those increasing spread in iNaturalist observations, they're doing well in places that you wouldn't predict that they're doing well. Okay? There you can see the polygon of where the extent of their current range is relative to where we think their predicted range could be. So what about their impact? One of the things we want to know is, are they having an effect on native or weeding species? Are they going to compete? And we do see evidence that yes. So we've done 2 years of survey. We plan to do a 5-year survey. So I could present to you 2 years, the first 2 years. These are the locations that we've been surveying for the past couple of years. And one of the things that we notice is this, that in the areas where this spider has become established, it becomes numerically the most dominant species. You see it far more than you see any other native species. And the only close native species is that Microthena vitrata, which is the upper, I guess left, maybe from your perspective, that tiny little white spider up there. That's Microthena vitrata. And it's pretty abundant in areas, but it's nowhere near the abundance of the Joro itself in those newly established areas. Generally, and I'll show you this particular one here, the trend is this. Where you see an increase in the abundance of the spider, you see a decrease in the abundance of native or weaving spiders as a result. And you can see that the abundance of the spider itself, so that's the second figure, one labeled A, abundance is on the bottom, and this is from a random forest regression. So the further away from the vertical line, the more important that particular feature is. So the abundance of Joros has a very large effect on the abundance of other native species that you see. And so we find that troubling, and we just want to follow it up for several years to see who is particularly at risk of this new invasive species. What are they eating? Well, generally they're eating lots of things. They're generalist predators, but their diet is mainly dipterans, hymenopterans, coleopterans, so beetles, wasps and bugs, as well as I already said beetles, but some lepidopterans as well. What is happening here? So in their native range, the gray region is their native range. Why is it that you don't find them further south? Because that's one of the things our models predicts, right? If you looked at North America, you would see that they're in areas, climate-wise, that you wouldn't predict them based on what their Asian distribution is. They're in lots warmer places, not necessarily wetter, but hotter summers and things like that, different kinds of seasonality in North America, and they're doing very, very well. So one thing is, why aren't they further in Asia? And so we think maybe competition with other native species is checking their spread in Asia, and they could potentially have a larger realized niche if they're not in competition. And of course, that needs to be tested. In North America, I had a couple students and I worked on a project where we were looking at web invasion. So what we did was we took native species and we put them into Joro webs to see if they would come into conflict with each other, or we took Joro spiders and put them into native webs to see what would be the conflict. A couple things that we noticed, it was interesting, and I'll just summarize it as this. Joros tend to be very, very tolerant of other neighbors. They're incredibly tolerant of being around each other. They will form these super colonies, and I'll show you some pictures later, of really these massive assemblages of these spiders all together at the same time. Our native spiders don't do that at all. So if their webs begin to interact, to touch each other, those native spiders tend to want to move away. They don't like those interactions at all. And so one of the things that could be happening here is this indirect competition, where they're both competing for the same general food sources, the Joro spiders and the native spiders, but they're not preying upon each other. It's more that one can tolerate neighbors and the other one doesn't really like it. And if a web spider leaves its web and to build somewhere else, it increases its risk of predation. Maybe that's why we're seeing a decrease overall. That's a hypothesis that we need to continue to test. But generally, behaviorally, that's what we see. It takes longer for Joros elicit a pretty strong prey response when they invade another spider's web. But generally, that spider tends to truck on through and move out of the web and doesn't stick around. So they don't take over each other's webs. We don't see any evidence of that. Human impact-wise, what are people going to have to deal with? Well, generally, they don't like spiders. I don't know about you, I love them, but most people don't like spiders. And these build enormous webs, and they're very, very conspicuous. So you're probably going to have a lot of people complaining, if you're like me, about being neighbors with these spiders and infesting their house. In fact, you can see those large, dense aggregations here. And if you go down to Atlanta, you'll see this kind of things. If somebody doesn't like to clean around their shed, this is exactly what you will see. This is the tolerance that I was talking about, that they don't mind being neighbors with each other, where our native species don't like that at all. You can see, based on what we saw before, there's a lot of hype about this species, a lot of media attention, but unfortunately there's not a lot that we know about it. But one thing is clear, I'll skip over to this. How the general public is interacting with Trichodecima clavata is different than how they're interacting with the native species. They are observed far more frequently than native species are, probably because they're pretty large and they're pretty colorful with really big webs and dense aggregations. But they're capturing the attention of the public. So this is an opportunity for us to engage with the public in terms of awareness, particularly because this is a venomous species. So finishing up here, very little is known about the venom, although the few studies that have occurred on the venom do not suggest that it would probably be a medically relevant bite. They tend to be more insect-specific toxins that don't affect us, and so we would think that it would be like bee sting or something like that level of reaction. However, that has not really been tested, and we probably should follow that up just to be sure. Because I'm assuming for clinicians, this is probably what you're going to be dealing with, is questions about the spider and how dangerous it is, or for vets, is it going to be dangerous for my pet? We don't really have much work on that, but I doubt that it will be, so we'll have to see. All right, I'll just move on to questions.
That's really, really interesting. So what questions do we have?
Any personal experience with the sting of this particular spider with your team?
Like being bitten, is that what you're saying?
Is it correct?
No. So in all the handling that we've done of them, like most spiders, these spiders are pretty non-aggressive. Their first reaction if you touch their web is they're going to run away. And then if you continue to interact with the web, they drop down to the ground and hide. And if you pick them up, their only goal is to get out of your hands. So to get bitten, you would have to be handling them pretty vigorously and then really be very careless. So we have not done stupid enough stuff to be bitten yet. Time will tell.